We after right here. Nice big crabs on a beautiful day. Look at that, boy.
What if I told you that Florida is surrounded by millions of crabs, yet most people barely eat them? It doesn't make sense at first. Walk along the coast and you'll find traps full of blue crab, fresh catches of stone crab.
Right here is a Florida stone crab, and you do not want to get pinched by that guy. Stone crabs are one of Florida's most expensive seafoods,
And even growing numbers of European green crab. So why aren't they everywhere on people's plates? Why isn't everyone eating them? This is the untold story of why Florida doesn't devour its millions of crabs. You won't just understand why they're not eating them. You'll start seeing these crabs in a completely different way. Florida's crab abundance. Florida's waters are packed with life in a way most people never really think about. Under the surface, there is a constant movement of shells, claws, sand, and feeding activity happening every single day. One of the biggest parts of this hidden world is the blue crab, which thrives across the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic estuaries. In many parts of Florida, they are available all year round, which already shows how rich the ecosystem is. But blue crabs are only one part of the picture. Another important species is the stone crab, one of Florida's most famous seafood resources. These crabs are known for their strong, sweet claws, which are considered a high-value delicacy in seafood markets. What makes them even more interesting is not just how they are eaten, but how they are harvested, which is very different from most other seafood. Then there are horseshoe crabs, which often gather in large groups along beaches during spawning season. Even though they are not true crabs, they play an important role in coastal ecosystems. Their presence is not about food alone, but about supporting the natural balance of the shoreline environment. In recent years, another species has entered the system. The European green crab has started spreading due to warming oceans and increased shipping activity. Unlike native species, this crab is invasive, meaning it does not naturally belong in Florida waters. Its growing population has created both concern and curiosity among scientists and fishers. All of these crabs together form a very active underwater system. They are not just random animals living in the ocean. They are part of a connected network where each species plays a role. Some are predators, some are prey, and others help shape the environment by feeding, digging, or reproducing in large numbers. For example, blue crabs help control smaller marine organisms while also serving as food for larger animals like fish, birds, and even sea turtles. Stone crabs also contribute to this balance, even though they are more famous for their claws than their full bodies. Horseshoe crabs support the ecosystem in a different way, especially during spawning when thousands gather on beaches, providing food for shorebirds. So even though Florida's crab population is huge, it is not just about abundance. It is about balance. These crabs are also deeply connected to Florida's seafood industry, which is worth millions of dollars. Blue crabs, and stone crabs especially, play a big role in commercial fishing. They support jobs, supply chains, restaurants, and export markets. But even with all this natural wealth, Florida does not consume its crabs in the same way some other coastal regions do. In places like Maryland's Chesapeake Bay, blue crabs are a cultural symbol. They are part of big family meals and seasonal traditions. In Florida, the situation looks different. Even though the crabs are available in large numbers, they do not dominate local eating habits in the same way. This is where things start to get interesting. The reason is not simple. It is not about shortage or lack of access. It is about systems that control how these crabs are used. Rules, economics, and conservation all shape what happens after the crabs are caught. For example, blue crabs in Florida are protected by size limits. Smaller crabs are not allowed to be harvested because they need time to grow and reproduce. Female crabs carrying eggs are also protected during breeding periods. These rules are important because they keep the population stable over time. There is also strong demand from outside Florida. A large portion of blue crab caught locally is shipped to northern states, where there is higher demand for traditional crab dishes. This means many crabs leave Florida before they ever reach local dinner tables. Stone crabs follow an even stricter system. Only the claws can be harvested, and the crab must be returned alive to the water. This claw-only rule is designed to protect the species and allow it to regenerate. The crab can actually grow a new claw over time, which makes this one of the most unique fishing systems in the world. But it also means something important. Not the whole animal is used for food. Only part of it ever reaches the market. When all of this is combined, a clear pattern appears. Florida is not short on crabs. In fact, it has more than enough natural supply. But the way those crabs are managed changes how they are used. The system is designed to protect long-term survival, not just short-term consumption. That means rules are in place to prevent overfishing, maintain population balance, and support both nature and the economy at the same time. So even though it might look like Florida has endless crabs in its waters, the reality is more controlled and carefully managed. And that sets up a bigger question for what comes next. If there is so much abundance in the water, why don't people actually eat most of it locally? And where does it all really go? Horseshoe crabs, ancient blood that saves millions of lives. At first, the question sounds almost too simple to even think about. Florida has so many crabs moving through its waters, so why aren't people just eating them everywhere, all the time? But the moment you slow down and actually look at what is happening beneath the surface, you start to realize something important. Not everything in the ocean is treated the same way, and not everything that is abundant is meant to become food. To really understand this, we have to start with one of the most unusual animals living along Florida's coastline, the horseshoe crab. At first, the name is misleading because it is not a true crab at all. It is actually closer to spiders and scorpions in its biological classification. Even more surprising is its age. This creature has existed for over 400 million years, meaning it was already on Earth long before dinosaurs appeared. It has survived mass extinctions, extreme climate shifts, and massive changes in the planet's oceans. That alone makes it feel less like a food source and more like something ancient, still holding on to life. But what truly sets it apart is not just how old it is, but what is inside it. Horseshoe crab blood is blue, and that blue blood has become extremely important in modern science. In the 1970s, researchers discovered something unexpected. When this blood comes into contact with harmful bacterial toxins, it reacts almost instantly by forming a clot. That reaction led to the creation of a medical testing method called the Limulus amoebocyte lysate test, commonly known as the LAL test. It is now used globally to check whether vaccines, injectable medications, IV fluids, and medical equipment are safe before they reach humans. This means horseshoe crabs are not just ocean animals anymore. They are part of the global medical safety system. Every time someone receives an injection or a vaccine, there is a strong chance that this test played a role in ensuring it was safe. Because of this discovery, horseshoe crabs are collected in large numbers every year. Hundreds of thousands are taken from coastal waters and transported to laboratories. In these facilities, about 30% of their blood is carefully extracted, and after that, they are returned to the ocean. The process itself takes around 48 hours. However, it is not harmless. Between 10 and 30% of them do not survive the stress. Others survive but are weakened afterwards, especially females who often produce fewer eggs once they return. And here is where things become even more striking. Just 1 quart of horseshoe crab blood can cost up to $15,000. That makes it one of the most expensive biological fluids on Earth. So when people ask why they are not eaten in large numbers, the answer is not about taste, culture, or availability. It is about value that has nothing to do with food at all. Their worth is tied directly to medicine, not meals. This creates a very unusual situation in Florida's coastal ecosystem. Even though horseshoe crabs are present, they are treated more like medical resources than seafood. Pharmaceutical companies depend on them. Hospitals depend on them. Entire safety systems in medicine depend on them. So instead of being part of the food chain, they are part of the healthcare chain. That is a completely different role in nature, and it changes how humans interact with them. Now, when you compare this to another important species in Florida waters, the stone crab, you see a very different kind of system, but one that is still heavily controlled. Stone crabs are not left untouched like horseshoe crabs, but they are not harvested in full either. Instead, fishermen are only allowed to take the claws. One claw if it is large enough, sometimes two if both meet the legal size. The rest of the crab is carefully returned alive to the ocean. At first, this might sound unusual, but there is a biological reason behind it. Stone crabs can regenerate their claws over time. Within 1 to 2 years, they grow them back and continue living. This ability to regenerate is what makes the entire fishery sustainable. It allows harvesting without completely removing the animal from the ecosystem, but it also limits how much can actually be consumed. Because you are not dealing with whole crabs being sold and cooked in large quantities. You are dealing with a system where only parts of the animal are taken, and even that is strictly controlled. The economic side of this is also important. Stone crab claws are highly valuable, sometimes selling for $30 to $60 per pound, depending on size and demand. This makes them a premium seafood product rather than a common food item. But that high value is tied directly to restriction. The more controlled the system is, the more expensive the product becomes. There is also a strict seasonal rule in place. Stone crab harvesting is only allowed from mid-October to early May. Outside of that period, fishing stops completely. This break is not random. It exists to protect breeding cycles and allow populations to recover naturally. Without this pause, the system would slowly collapse over time. If fishermen were allowed to harvest whole crabs freely, the population would drop quickly. Once breeding numbers fall below a certain point, recovery becomes extremely difficult. That is why the system is designed around partial harvesting instead of full consumption. It protects the species while still allowing economic activity to continue. When you look at both horseshoe crabs and stone crabs together, a pattern starts to appear. Not all marine life is managed in the same way. Some species are protected because they are essential to medicine. Others are carefully controlled to prevent collapse. And in both cases, the focus is not on how much can be taken, but on how much must remain untouched for the system to survive. So the idea that Florida's waters are simply full of crabs ready to be eaten is not accurate. The reality is much more structured. There are medical systems, ecological systems, and economic systems all working at the same time, shaping what is allowed and what is not. And once you understand that, the original question starts to change. It is no longer just about why crabs are not eaten. It becomes about how nature and human systems decide what is valuable enough to protect and what is allowed to become food in the first place. And once you see how some crabs are protected by science and others by strict survival rules, the next part becomes even more surprising, because abundance does not always mean access. And Florida is where that truth becomes impossible to ignore. The famous stone crab claw-only rule that protects the population. The stone crab is at the center of one of Florida's most unique seafood systems. It appears like regular fishing at first, but the restrictions modify how the animal is treated. The claws are taken off instead of the complete crab. One claw is normally taken, but sometimes two are taken if both are at least 2 7/8 inches long. After that, the crab is put back in the ocean alive, not thrown away.
Stone crab claws are one of the priciest seafoods you can buy. And depending on their size, strangely enough, fishers can only harvest the claws from the crabs, while the bodies must be returned to the ocean.
This method dramatically changes the way we think about harvesting. The purpose is not to get rid of the animal, but to be a part of the ecosystem while keeping it alive. That one guideline is what makes stone crab fishing different from most other seafood businesses throughout the world. It makes it such that the crab's home is still the ocean, even after it has been caught. The crab is not done once it is back. Over time, it can grow back its missing claw.
Stone crabs have a remarkable ability to survive even after losing their claws. And after they molt, their claws come back, making stone crab harvesting a sustainable fishery.
The process of regeneration normally takes 1 to 2 years, but it might take longer or shorter depending on the temperature of the water, the amount of food available, and the person's general health. The new claw grows back slowly and ultimately works again. Because of this capacity, stone crabs are a renewable resource instead of a one-time catch. That regeneration changes everything about how the fishery works. The method doesn't permanently remove animals from the population. Instead, it lets people engage with the same animals over and over again. As long as it stays alive and healthy in the wild, a single crab can give more than once in its lifetime. The time of year when you can harvest is likewise very strict. Fishing is only allowed from October 15th to May 1st. Outside of these dates, fishing is not allowed. This restricted season lets the population reproduce and heal without any stress. Females that lay eggs are also completely safe, which means that breeding can continue without any problems. The goal of every rule is to keep the population constant for the future. Stone crabs are very valuable in terms of money. Their claws are a high-end seafood item that can cost between $30 and $60 per pound, depending on size and demand. That makes them one of the most costly crab products in the U.S. seafood industry. There is a lot of demand, especially for coastal cuisine and dining in restaurants. But even with that demand, people don't eat everything. The law stops it from happening. You can only take the claws. The rest of the crab must be set free. That's why you don't see whole stone crabs on menus very often. It's not about being available, it's about following the rules. This technique is meticulously designed to keep breeding populations safe. Too many adult crabs that can reproduce would be taken out of the ecosystem if whole crabs were caught. That would eventually cause the population to die out. The claw-only rule stops that from happening by keeping the species alive and moving around in the water. The most essential thing about this method is how clearly it exposes the trade-off between use and survival. The crab needs to stay alive for the fishery to work. If the population fails, the whole industry goes away with it. So that risk is avoided by every portion of the system. Florida doesn't depend on full crab harvesting for stone crabs for this reason. The system won't let it happen. The animal is always sent back to the ocean in part, which means that survival is part of the economic paradigm, not apart from it. The main premise behind all of this is simple but powerful. Long-term sustainability is more important than short-term gain. The fishery is built to last, not to get the most fish right away. Once you understand that, the second half of the story becomes even more crucial. This is because there is another type of crab in the same waters, but it has to deal with a whole different set of pressures and expectations. The mostly exported instead of eaten locally. Something unusual is happening under Florida's waters. Alongside native crabs that have lived there for years, a new species is showing up and changing the rules completely. The European green crab is small, but the impact it creates is anything but small. It is not part of Florida's natural system, yet it is spreading fast and pushing into places it was never meant to be. This crab originally comes from Europe and parts of North Africa. Long ago, it likely traveled across oceans inside ships, hidden in ballast water. Over time, it spread along coastlines, adapting to new environments with ease. Now, warmer ocean temperatures and heavy global shipping have helped it move even further, reaching parts of the United States, including Florida's coastal waters. And once it arrives, it does not behave like a quiet visitor. The green crab is aggressive. It survives in different water conditions, tolerates changing temperatures, and does not struggle in environments where native species depend on balance. That flexibility is exactly what makes it dangerous. In Florida's ecosystem, it starts to affect things quickly. One of the biggest issues is what it eats. Green crabs feed heavily on small shellfish like clams, oysters, and mussels. These are not just food sources in the ocean. They are important parts of the coastal system. When they disappear, everything connected to them begins to weaken. A single green crab can eat dozens of small clams in just one day. Now imagine that happening across thousands of crabs over time. The pressure on shellfish populations becomes very serious. But feeding is only part of the problem. Green crabs also damage habitats. They dig into the seabed and disturb eelgrass beds, which are like underwater nurseries. Many fish and marine animals depend on these areas for shelter when they are young. When eelgrass is destroyed, those safe spaces disappear. That means fewer places for marine life to grow and survive. Now compare this with native species like the blue crab, which are part of a balanced system in Florida. Native crabs have predators, natural limits, and regulations that control how many can be harvested. Green crabs do not follow that balance in the same way. They make babies really quickly. One female can lay up to 200,000 eggs in one breeding cycle. Once their population starts to grow, it's quite hard to keep it under control. Because of this, some places have adopted traditional ways to control things. There are traps, systems for manual removal, and programs for monitoring, but they are costly and hard to scale. They usually slow the spread instead of stopping it completely, even when they work. Florida has begun to think in a different way. A new idea is being tested. Instead of just trying to catch green crabs, they are being turned into food. People often call this method "eat the invaders." The idea is easy. If the crab hurts things and people want to eat it, then catching it becomes more important. That puts pressure on the people in a different way. Wildlife authorities, such as the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, started testing this method in 2025 and 2026. Fishers are urged to catch green crabs, and they may get minor rewards for doing so. At the same time, cooks are trying out new ways to cook them. The taste isn't that awful. When cooked correctly, green crab tastes a little sweet, which is similar to blue crab in certain ways. But because it is small and has a tough shell, it is not as easy to work with. Preparation is really important. Because of that, new recipes are being developed. To make crab more palatable to regular people, they are testing crab cakes, soups, and pasta meals. Campaigns to raise public awareness also assist in shaping the idea. People are encouraged to consider green crab as something that can be gotten rid of by eating it, rather than just a nuisance. But this idea isn't great. Green crabs are smaller than other types of crabs, such as stone or blue crabs. They don't have as much meat. That makes it harder to transform them into a big commercial food item. There are also tight restrictions on how to handle them to keep them safe to eat. Experts are watchful then. It's good to eat green crab, but it's not enough on its own. Trapping and monitoring still need to happen in the background. This method, even with those constraints, shows something important. It's a change in how you think. People are trying to solve the problem not only by fighting nature with control measures, but also by using economics and food systems. It's not the best answer, but it's a creative one. The goal is no longer merely to get rid of the invader, it is also to make it helpful. Even with fresh ideas like these, the green crab keeps spreading in many places. And it brings up a wider question. What happens when even the most plentiful and well-run ecosystems start to have difficulties that don't follow the regular rules? And just when it looks like Florida has found a way to make an invasion work for them. The last section of the story shows why abundance, rules, and even innovation don't entirely explain what's going on in these waters. Florida's Eat the Invaders pilot program. Around 2025 and 2026, a new and strange notion starts to get a lot of attention in Florida. Officials started trying a new plan called the Eat the Invaders initiative instead of only catching invading species. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is in charge of it, and chefs, biologists, and seafood processors all work together. The European green crab, a small invasive species that is expanding over coastal waters, is the main emphasis. The notion is straightforward, yet not very common. People are told to catch and consume it instead of just trying to get rid of it. That makes control something that is helpful and active. To help with this, anglers who bring in green crabs get minor rewards.
Customers love that. So you can make a bisque with blue crab or lobster, but green crabs actually have exponentially more that dark, roasty ocean flavor you really want.
At the same time, cooks start trying out new recipes for things like crab cakes, bisques, and spaghetti. The goal is not only to cook differently, but also to get people to desire to consume an invasive species. This method has already been tried out in states like Maine and Massachusetts. Chefs in those areas noticed that when green crab is cooked correctly, it might taste a little sweet. Florida was confident enough to try something similar on its own coast after that first accomplishment. This program likewise relies heavily on public communications. People say that green crabs are a control food, which means that consuming them directly improves the environment. Some Florida restaurants even put them on their menus, frequently as an eco-friendly seafood choice. They also keep a close eye on food safety. Agencies collaborate with processors to make sure that the right way to handle and cook food is being used. The idea is simple, but it's necessary to prepare it correctly for taste and safety. The program is still not ideal, though. Green crabs are small compared to other types of crabs, including the stone crab. This makes them harder to use in big seafood dishes. A lot of people also hesitate because they don't know much about the species. Even with such constraints, the idea is starting to transform how people think about invasive species. Now, instead of only seeing them as a problem, there is a chance to turn them into a resource. This shows a change in how people think. Control isn't just about getting rid of things anymore, it is also about change. Conservation, medicine, and consumption. The crab environment in Florida is now in a very delicate state. Depending on their importance in nature, science, and the economy, different species are being handled in very diverse ways. There isn't one rule that works for everything now. Some creatures don't even eat. The blue blood of the horseshoe crab is utilized in medical tests, hence it is protected. That blood helps make sure that immunizations and injectable medications don't have any harmful bacteria in them. In this scenario, the value is not in food, but in medicine. There are rigorous guidelines for other species, like the stone crab, that say only claws can be taken and the crab must be returned alive. This technique preserves reproduction and the seafood business at the same time. Blue crabs work in a different way. They move through export markets and fuel demand outside of Florida more than inside it. Instead of just being a problem, scientists are also looking into invasive green crabs as a viable solution. There is a different form of value for each species that shapes its journey. The Eat the Invaders initiative shows a change in how people think. Florida is trying out consumption as a way to control the environment in addition to removal and limitation. If it works, it might help local economies while lowering the number of invasive species. But the mechanism is still hard to understand. We still need rigorous rules to protect native species. For scientists, medical species must stay in the environment, and invasive species need to be watched all the time to keep them from spreading out of hand. Nothing here works on its own. Balance is the key to the future of Florida's crab system. There needs to be a balance between nature and industry, science and food, and control and adaptation. It's not only about catching fish anymore, it has to do with running a whole living system. Florida's seas are doing more than just making food. They are seeing how people react when ecosystems change more quickly than people can adapt. What stands out most? The fact that horseshoe crab blood is tied to life-saving medicine, the strict claw-only rule that protects stone crab populations, or Florida's bold attempt to turn invasive green crabs into a food solution? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into food, nature, and science, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. See you in the next one.